And we're all good. Hi, I'm Dr. Sadaf. I'm from Embra Health, and I'm here on a monthly basis, really excited to be doing so, just providing some resourcing and education that can help just further understanding about this really unique experience of surrogacy, just help build some resourcing for you, just kind of help in whatever way possible. And we're focusing on topics that are very relevant and very important to discuss on an ongoing basis. Tonight's topic is going to be about the IP-GC relationship, this really one-of-a-kind bond. You've likely never had a relationship like this if you're a GC or if you're an IP. And so it's helpful to understand what you're getting yourself into, essentially, what you're sort of going to need to expect and learn from this experience, but also just to have what you need to know to have a positive dynamic and go into this with some security, some peace, some understanding. I do want to take a really brief poll. I see a lot of familiar faces in here, which I love to see. Is anyone in here, I guess, who in here is a gestational carrier? Can you either like raise your hand with the hand signal or just say me?
I am on my third journey as a surrogate.
Amazing. Cool. So we have a veteran surrogate in here. Love that.
I'm
And
on my second journey.
cool. Another one as well.
I'm on my first journey.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, so 3 so far. Anyone else? Cool. So I'll take that. These may be relevant topics to you. Either you've experienced them or you have yet to experience them. So I'll just jump right in with this. So I'm Dr. Sadaf. I'm from Embra Health. Embra Health is a mental health care company in the family building sector and space. Our whole goal is to provide not only mental health resourcing and touch points for carriers, donors, and intended parents, but also for agencies and clinics as well. Everyone kind of needs that added cushion of emotional support. So that's sort of our big goal. Fun fact, I was a prior egg donor. Well, I guess I am an egg donor. I donated a long time ago. And I recently I connected in person with a few of the children through donor conception, through my experience with donor conception. So really, really amazing. And I have just a deep love for this area of family building. So that's why I'm here. Let's jump right into what makes this relationship unique. Again, the IP and GC dynamic. The first thing is this isn't really a friendship, right? It's not purely transactional, but it's not like you met at a coffee shop and you hit it off and you've chatted for 4 hours and you want to be good friends. It lives in its own emotional category. You're also entering into something when you're an intended parent or a gestational carrier that is deeply personal right off the bat. Often before really getting to know each other. And like, think about any other experience in your life when you've done that, if any. Like, what other role or position or stage of life have you just immediately immersed and trusted someone that you hardly even knew? This is sort of the dynamic with surrogacy. It is a bond that is built on trust, vulnerability, and a shared purpose to bring a baby into this world. Again, this is like huge shared goal. Like, what other relationship in your life outside of maybe like a marriage or a partnership has this very big goal at the end of it that is shared, that is sort of life-changing. It's a big deal, right? So this is a very unique dynamic. There you go. The big part of this is that you say yes before you even know each other to sharing an experience like this together. Most of the real relationship actually happens after the match. So if you're in the early stages as a carrier, like, you have the profile, you kind of have the gist of who these people or this person is and are, but you don't know much about their mannerisms, their life experience. You really don't know much. You learn all of that after. And that's a level of risk that you're taking by doing surrogacy and by being a gestational carrier. My favorite example is like you're planning a cross-country trip. Like, you're planning a trip from California to New York, and then you like have learned and met these people. You've agreed that, hey, we're both going to go to New York, get in the car. And you're just going to have to figure it out along the way of how you interact with each other, how you like to drive. All of that's new, but the shared goal is there, and you're on the road at the exact time that you're learning one another. You learn each other's rhythms, values, comfort zones in real time, which can be kind of stressful. I mean, I compare this to a little bit to like my relationship with my kids. I have young toddlers and I'm learning about them in real time all the time. Like one day I'm learning this and the next day they don't like that anymore. And it keeps me on my toes and it keeps me a little bit in an anxious state. Sometimes that's comparable to this IPGC relationship because you're just, especially in the beginning, you just don't know what you're learning until you learn it that day or that moment or that experience. So it can be a lot. What this looks like in real life is it's those behaviors, right? Like one person may want regular text and updates. They might want to talk a lot more on a day-to-day basis. Another person might not, might only want to really hear from you or want to share around appointments or things that are sort of more like milestone related. Somebody in the dynamic might want to share more emotionally, the emotional highs, the lows, things they're challenged with, they're excited about. While the other person might be a little bit more reserved or focus more on tasks, right? Like let's complete legal and get excited there. Let's complete, screening and get excited there. And that's sort of how they experience the joy in it. So it all varies. These differences aren't deal breakers. Sometimes they feel bigger than they are because you have a certain expectation of how you want this experience to go for you. But they're not deal breakers. They're invitations to check in. And I think an important part of about being a carrier going into surrogacy is you have to have this layer of flexibility and openness. And sometimes that's easier said than done. On the intended parent side, the same thing applies. But I think as a carrier, and there are some carriers here that maybe can talk about this, you almost innately kind of feel a sense of pressure maybe, or this experience of like, I want to make sure I'm the best person I can be in this experience and to these intended parents and to my agency. And I want to be accommodating and I want to be empathetic and understanding and I want to compromise and do what is asked of me. And that can take a lot from you. Carriers, I'm going to poke at you a little bit in here. I know someone has done this twice at least, and someone who's just about to do this. How does that relate? How does that connect to you and just your experience of being in a relationship with an intended parent?
It can for sure be stressful at times because, like you said, you are constantly in this state of like, you want everything to go perfectly. You don't want to upset your intended parents or you don't want to cause roadblocks to something. But at the same time, you're kind of in this complex situation where you also have to think about you and what's best for you and your family and the things you're going through. And so I would definitely agree that it can be stressful, but and complex at the same time.
Yeah. And
I think,
I'll go for it,
I was,
please.
I was going to say, for me in particular, this is my first journey, and I went in not thinking like I really cared about the type of relationship that I was going to have with my intended parent. And as time has gone on, I've learned that actually I do care what type of relationship I have with my intended parent, and it just so happens that it seems that my intended parent doesn't want that same relationship. And so I'm having to adjust my expectations and change the way that I didn't necessarily think that I wanted this to go, but later realize that that's how I wanted it to go. And I'm having to adjust that a little bit.
Gosh, I'm so happy you shared, Alyssa, because that is in our slides tonight. But yes, you really do. Again, the relationship really doesn't start until after you've decided there will be a relationship. And that's where things start to really shine. And you learn a lot more about the dynamic. And it's very common for a carrier to go into this. I mean, I do a lot of GC evals, so I'll often speak to carriers and we'll hear, I'll do whatever feels right for them. Like I'm totally easy about it. Like, whatever they kind of want or need, I'm willing. And, our encouragement is always like, no, but what do you want and need, because that's something we don't want getting missed in the conversation. And that is a reality that we don't want you coming across after match, after legal, when things are starting, or you've just transferred an embryo and you're like, oh, we are different and more different than I thought. So those conversations, never too late to have, and we'll talk about, but I do appreciate you brought that in the room, because that is a realization and a reality of this dynamic. You just don't know anything until after it's sort of happening. And
Question. Will
yeah.
you later on, and I don't know if it's in your slideshow, will you go over the dynamic of like the wants even changing? Like you guys have had that conversation, and then either later on or after the journey has ended, one or the other party decides they no longer want communication, or a different answer than maybe what had been agreed upon at matching.
Yes, we're going to talk about changing minds, which is a big part of this experience and going through something like this on either end of just having your realities change or shift or alter from what you originally started with. So we'll talk about that. Thank you.
I think you can also make really good decisions going into a secondary or even a third journey, because you go in with different expectations and a different mindset than what you went in on your first one. On your first one, you may, like she said, she didn't know what she wanted. Well, for journey number 2, you make different match points and you set those standards and you set that bar. And maybe your second journey comes out differently because you truly did decide through your first journey what was important to you or what expectations you could and couldn't meet. So I think you grow as you continue to do journeys, and you just probably get better at it. Also, each relationship with IPs are totally different. So even though you go in with different expectations and you know what you want for journey number 2, your setup independent parents are different. And so you go about those conversations differently as well. Everything is just so fluid based on the people that you're with, or the new, journey coordinator you have. Like, they handle conversations differently as well. And, whether they want to handle it by themselves or group or things like that, every situation is so different. So I like that.
Yep.
To kind of play off of that, Jackie, I was gonna say, it can be also hard as you go into a secondary or third journey with expectations of, my first journey went so well, and then it's like, will my intended parents even, meet those expectations, or could they, could it even go as well as my first journey, or vice versa? My first journey was so bad. If I go into a second journey, am I going to have the same experience? And so every single journey is different. And as someone who's been through it twice, I can definitely attest to that.
Yep. I appreciate this commentary so much. And like, even a second or third journey, you're still walking into an environment that is unpredictable and uncontrollable. You have a little bit more autonomy in choosing your IPs based on preferences, experience, but you're still walking into this landscape, this environment of like, how is this actually going to go? And I still have to figure this out. I know a little bit more about what I want, but I still don't know much about them. So that relationship dynamic is still like the ever flowing question mark throughout the entire thing. And we'll get into a lot of that, but I do appreciate these insights. Let's talk about personalities. This is a big part of matching, and like a big part of whether you're having the experience that you want or not. You might be matched with someone whose communication style or emotional expression is different than yours. And this is worth spending time thinking about. This is also something that thankfully you can work with. Like, you can shape and mold for this relationship to make it manageable, to make it peaceful, to make it what you need, just like you do in others. Like, thinking about other relationships that you have where like your personalities really aren't the same. I have a best friend who has a very different personality than me, but I love her and she's my best friend for that reason when I think about it. So difference in personality types works when you try to make it work, when you find the ways that it works. An example here is like, let's say you're a carrier and you're chatty, you're bubbly, you're that extroverted friend. Like, you want to chat, you want to text, you want to tell them everything. You might be in a position or in a match with an IP or IPs that are a little bit more quiet and cautious. And you might not know that at match, because at match, they might be turning it on, right? Like, hey, like this is us and this is what we're about. And everyone's kind of turning it on at match and just trying to be a little bit more presentable. But who you are outside of surrogacy is still who you are in surrogacy. So it is something that you're going to learn in terms of how your personalities mesh and mold. Some IPs are really detail focused and want constant updates. We'll cover this a little bit later, but that can come from their own stress and trauma responses. That can come from deeper rooted stuff. As a carrier, maybe that dynamic would be really overwhelming to have an intended parent who's like constantly asking for updates or texting their reader, wanting the tiniest details. So that does matter in terms of how you want to share and what you want to share about in terms of your personality and how they mesh. You're not in a bad position if you are in a match where the personalities don't connect, where your IP is very different than yours. It just takes a little bit of maneuvering and a little bit of compromising, some creativity too. The differences are normal. Again, they just require curiosity and compassion. So like if you're in a dynamic where your intended parent, like you want to be this way and match and this relationship, but maybe your intended parent is not receiving it that way or is wanting something else. At first, I imagine it feels like a sting. It feels personal. You could feel like, gosh, like, is it me? Like what's happening here? Oftentimes though, because I've spoken and seen the intended parent side, like I've never really heard an intended parent say, gosh, my carrier is so annoying. She tells me too many things. She's too communicative. Like that's not where their mind goes. A lot of the times on the intended parent side, there's something deeper there that's affecting how they're showing up. But all of this is just to be met with compassion. Examples, like if you're someone who's like, I want to send you a lot of photos, here's my bump photos, here's, stuff to share. An IP might be hesitant with those types of communications, or maybe they respond, but it's brief, or if they actually don't really care. Sometimes culturally as well, like a bump photo feels a little invasive to get. And so there might be something there. Maybe they're not telling you this, but like you're sending a bump photo and it seems like a happy occasion and you don't really get the response that you thought you'd get. There are a lot of layers to that, just like there would be for you on various occasions or circumstances. The communication aspect is really important. Like we talk about communication a lot, but like that is the backbone of an IPGC relationship. That is literally all you have to build trust in real time is constant communication, constant understanding, constant learning, constant reiteration or validation. Like you just have your words to really make this as powerful and as peaceful as you want it to be. And outside of that, it's just grace and empathy too. So like checking in, creating space for conversation, for communication, that's like the biggest way you can get two different personalities to come together in a mutually agreed place. Any insight around the personality dynamics of this relationship from anyone?
I want to jump in and share something if it's okay. So I'm an intended parent or previous two-time intended parent, and I know that we're talking about personalities and what it might be, what it might mean. And from an intended parent, one thing that you know that I've experienced is, for example, like you know when the gestational carrier might not be very responsive or not, willing to share so much information. And you mentioned earlier that, intended parents might want to know everything and want to, get a lot of information. And when we're talking about personalities, not only is it like the intended parents type of personality, but also like what is the personality of the gestational carrier, and how that, influences the overall dynamic as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Joey. Hi, bestie. Yeah, and Joey's a fellow clinician, so he has some of these insights as well. But it's definitely both-sided, right? It's 2, 3, 4 personalities coming together and trying to figure out, okay, like how do we like each other? How do we do this? Maybe we don't like each other, but how do we how do we get through this in a way that promotes peace on both ends? And that's the reality of the IPGC relationship too. It's not all butterflies. And I think TikTok will paint this image of surrogacy oftentimes that is the butterflies and the rainbows, and that's not quite it. That's not necessarily a human reality version of this. And that's perfectly okay. Cultural considerations. This is a big part of the IPGC relationship. Like one of the biggest parts. Culture shapes communication, boundaries, expectations, behaviors, everything. It dictates how someone involves or communicates around topics like family, privacy, even emotional expression. So like if you're ever in a dynamic, for those of you who've been matched, if you've worked with intended parents who were from a different country or spoke a different native language or came from a different culture, you might have close up seen how those cultural dynamics played a role in the basics, like what is shared or not shared, what is received and not received, what is communicated and not communicated, and just like the dynamic of how the relationship felt. One person's culture may feel like directness is valuable. That is the approach. It's good, it's respectful. Another person's culture might lean into indirect communication or deference, like, hey, it looks like being quiet, it looks like being distant, but that in their culture is a form of respect. Some cultures may view pregnancy as deeply private. And then thinking about it too, some of the intended parents that come to surrogacy may or may not hold a lot of shame around this aspect of family building because of their culture, because of their experiences. So it makes it even more private and sensitive for them. While others might celebrate it joyously and communally. You see this with the LGBTQIA population more, where there's not a lot of trauma held in this family building experience. It's more joy, and it's that presentation of, this is how we build our family. But it varies so much, and who your intended parent is and what they're coming in with will impact your relationship dynamic. Flipped, this applies as the carrier as well. Your culture, your experiences, your background also should shape and do shape how you show up in this type of relationship. If you're a carrier, you have a big heart by nature. There's this altruism that is leading you toward surrogacy and toward helping someone in this way. But that doesn't take over the other aspects of your identity that dictate your values and how you behave and how you think about things. So the cultural pieces are huge and to not be ignored. This is like the biggest area of growth and learning that you can have in the IPGC relationship, is just asking questions and learning about each other's culture. There's no right way to show up. It's just different ways. And when everything is different, your go-to should just be understanding and learning. That is how you like overcome differences, is open mind, understanding, and learning. And just being curious and not assumptive. There are good questions to ask. So like very early in the stages of matching, like in your matching experience, you may or may not have explored some of the cultural dynamics. When we encourage joint consultations, which are those meetings with the intended parents and the carrier after match, we go into this a lot more too, of like, hey, like, are there any cultural values or traditions that need to be made aware of that can be respected through this process? And sometimes there are, like, sometimes I had one that was like, we have these preferences around pregnancy when a woman is pregnant in our culture, that like she avoids certain foods, or she wears socks all the time, or she's, drinking hot drinks. And these are things that, I think maybe for someone to say out loud that's not related to you or like is in your culture sounds silly, but oftentimes are deeply appreciated and respected. So these types of conversations should be happening on both ends regarding just considerations around culture, viewpoints. It really connects everyone together too. I think on the carrier's end and the intended parent side, even a silly little detail like wear socks all the time is a connecting point. I've had intended parents send their carrier like all these fun socks because that was like their one consideration. And so she got like a ton of cool socks out of this. And like, there can be ways that these considerations are highly connecting. Anybody want to share about this part, or if it's relevant? keep it moving. Trauma and grief, another very important aspect of the IP and GC relationship. So again, many intended parents, not generalizing all, but many come into surrogacy after infertility, miscarriage, loss, their own personal challenges with building their family. And many gestational carriers have their own lived experience that shape how they carry others emotionally. There's always this dynamic that is in the room. Or for a carrier, if you're someone who wants to do this, wants to be a surrogate, you likely have had positive experiences with pregnancy. This hasn't been like a major pain point in your life. You don't have negative associations. You've had a like pretty successful or decent experience with the physicality of it. And that dynamic can be so different from someone who didn't have that experience. And so trauma and grief can show up in that relationship dynamic and in communication in very tricky ways. Trauma and trauma experiences will also impact how people trust, communicate, and connect. So even if you're a carrier who hasn't gone through negative experiences around birth, but has gone through experiences with people and relationships that make you very, I don't know, like aware, a little more curious, a little more guarded, you're going to have that in a surrogacy experience. That's going to follow you along here too. It should. It's your protective factor. Signs of trauma-informed dynamics, how you know trauma is in the room in your relationship, are kind of these things: needing more control or clarity. That can be for both sides, like being really, really particular about what's happening, how it's happening, where it's happening, focusing a lot on details, very small details. That's kind of how you know where trauma is in the room. Emotional distance as a form of protection. So this is where you see like maybe intended parents kind of emotionally distancing, or maybe they were highly engaged at certain points, and then at certain points of the journey, they're not, they're kind of further out, or it becomes shorter. On the carrier side, same thing. Like maybe there's something, life will happen, and you kind of need the emotional distance from this experience to carry on. Over apologizing or over accommodating is also a sign that trauma is in the room too. So feeling like, okay, I'm not doing enough, this is wrong, like I'm messing up, like this is my fault. I'm just feeling that constant pressure of performance, or that constant pressure of perfection, can be an indicator that trauma is in the room in this relationship dynamic. And trauma doesn't mean someone is too sensitive. So whether you're on the GC side or on the IP side, it just means there's a tenderness that needs to be applied to this dynamic. And it's always encouraged to learn more about each other and learn about what those potential big experiences are that are coming into the room that might be affecting the dynamic. But sometimes that's a little bit too soon, too deep when you're in a 9-10 month journey together. If it ever feels like trauma's in the room in your IP-GC relationship dynamic, that's a wonderful suggestion or signal that like you both individually need some supportive spaces. What we never want happening is an IP dumping and relying on a GC to carry the emotional weight of the experience for them, and vice versa. A GC relying and sort of hoping and like sort of signaling the IP as the emotional weight carrier of, hey, like I need you to affirm me and take care of me through this too. There needs to be a healthy balance of everyone just managing their own emotional experience without weighing heavily on the actual pregnancy experience together. Super curious if anyone has insights to share with this. And I imagine those of you who've had multiple journeys may or may not have had an experience like this.
So this one hits kind of hard for me with my first one. My IPs had no experience of loss. She had a hysterectomy very early in life, at the age of 24, 6 months after they were married. They did not have like any expectations of having children until 20 years later. They had inheritance, and that was the wish of grandparents, was like, go make a family, which means they went into their journey not having a clue how scary pregnancy could be, where loss like comes in, they were so naive about things that could go wrong. And anytime I was either having a bad day or like saying, okay, we've got to make it through like the first trimester, milestones, the second we transferred, she was like, great, can't wait to meet your OB and like, let's start making a birth plan. I was like, girl, we got 40 weeks to live through this. Like
Yes.
they had no realistic expectations about how long of a process it could be, and it was very hard for them to not understand any sort of like warning, like, hey, there may not be a heartbeat, or hey, meds may not be doing their thing, or hey, we may do a C-section. Like it was just pure bliss, joy, butterflies. Nothing could go wrong, which was very frustrating on my end, because I was like, I felt like I was holding all of the emotional side of it, trying to be transparent. And my agency, I don't know if they just like didn't know how to navigate the like extreme difference in our views, or if they really were just like those type of full glass people and nothing would ever go wrong. But it was a very big challenge for me to like get over my emotional struggle or my personal trauma when they had absolutely zero. My
Yeah.
second match is the opposite of that. This is like transfer number 8 between her and another surro. They've had nothing but loss. Like they haven't made it past certain milestones. So mom is very apprehensive at, your beta, and then at your 9 week, and then she's even scared at your 12, and she hasn't made it to 20 week. And so there are realistic expectations at every milestone, and she's just so much more understanding about the fear that does come along with the potential loss through every journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And you saw both sides of it, but like both really good examples of like the weight that transfers between IP and GC, this emotional weight, and like how important it is to make space for that emotional weight elsewhere. Honestly, when you look at IPGC journeys from like a far lens, especially as a mental health provider or professional, when I look at like challenging dynamics, it's because everyone's emotionally investing uh, in the experience, but dumping all of the weight of it onto each other. And it has made a world of difference when you have an IP who has their own resourcing and a GC who has their own resourcing. And even if they don't get along or like their differences are louder than most, can have such a positive experience together when the emotional weight of it is not transferring between one another. That's
Yeah,
not doing this for, right? Like you're not signing up to be the other person's therapist or their fertility coach. Your roles are distinguished and are clear. And when those become unclear, that's when a lot of this starts to feel really heavy.
yeah, I think with my first one, it was very unclear, like literally the entire journey until baby came out and light bulb click, and mom was like, that was a lot. Like
Yep.
it was way more, they were expecting movie, you push for 30 seconds and, oh, here's baby, and it's already nice and pretty and clean, and there's no, you know, it's just perfect. And it really wasn't until like we had birth that she later apologized and was like, I'm sorry for the weight that you carried your entire time, because you were right. You knew the expectations, you knew what was going on, and we were so naive going into all of this. And like I said, it really took until the end where she was so apologetic, thankful, obviously, but apologetic about how she had handled certain milestones or situations or my apprehensiveness through journey number 1. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And if you're with an agency like Surrogacy is, they highly push and encourage those mental health touch points. So like it doesn't matter what stage of a journey you're in, if it starts to really feel heavy between both parties, separate and dump elsewhere. Like I've stepped in at the 3rd trimester. I've stepped in right before birth, and literally like 2 days before birth, and helped everyone manage this emotional chaos and weight so that there would be a positive experience that came of it. So there's no wrong time to identify, hey, like we're putting too much into this onto each other, and for both of us to have a positive experience, we need to resource for ourselves. There's no wrong time for that. And if you're with an agency like Surrogacy is, it's like available to you in a snap. So please, for those of you who are on your journeys or like going to be starting another one like that, that's something you need to hold very closely and prioritize and use. Okay, let's keep going. So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, but like differences in the relationship desires. And this one's always tricky because at the beginning and before match, as a carrier, you maybe kind of have a vision of what you want this to look like, right? Or maybe you don't. For a first-time carrier, it's very common to think, I don't care who my intended parents are. It doesn't matter to me, their backgrounds. You know, I just want someone who's gonna like give me some communication and some update photos at the end and just kind of like the baseline stuff. And on the intended parent side, oftentimes it's a generalized desire as well. Like, you know, we don't mind, we'll do whatever she wants. Like, we want to make sure she's comfortable, like whatever she prefers. Everyone's saying that. Everyone's saying whatever they want, but then no one's actually saying what they want. And that's where all of this starts to unravel after match. So you might be in a dynamic where somebody wants the long-term friendship. And with surrogacy, again, this is like a relationship you can't really place. How I think about it and how I describe it, for me, it's in like 3 categories where it's sort of like this friendship, like, hey, it's like an arranged friendship. Like, we're going to be friends. So we've decided that. And friendships, you focus a lot more on the now, you're present, you want to get to know each other, care for each other, but the future is not really in sight. Like when I make a friend, I'm not thinking, oh yeah, in 10 years, we're going to do this. In 20 years, we're going to do this. Like friendship's very much here and now, but it's a deep care for each other. And you know that you want a relationship established. That could be where you are. Some people really see that familial bond or want that familial bond through surrogacy. Like I want us to be connected for life. I want our families to be connected. I want my children to know your children. Like this is my vision of what I want our relationship to look like. And that's very clear for some people. The third category is sort of like this coworker dynamic, which is not the nicest way to explain it, but it's sort of this aspect of we're going to partner together with this shared goal. We're going to complete our own tasks and do the things that we're responsible for. And we're going to engage, we're going to interact, we're going to be cordial, we're going to be kind, but there's nothing really more than that I'm going to give or that I expect to receive. And so like, it's just interesting to think about this ahead of time, but it's hard because you don't know anything about it, especially for a first timer. But it's valid. Like all of these options are valid. Surrogacy does not have to be the mold of being best friends with your intended parents and lifelong friends, and kids know each other. That's not good IPGC relationship. A good IPGC relationship can look like the one where you're checking in at appointments and you meet them before birth and that's it. Like that can be good for whoever you are based on your preferences. So super important at match and definitely like after match and just continuously in that first stage to talk about the hopes of the relationship as you learn more about each other every day. Boundaries during and after the journey. So if you're kind of set on some boundaries, that's fine. But we always are telling intended parents and GCs, especially at the beginning, like, hey, things will change. Do not get stuck with this idea or mold of who you're going to be with each other now or in the future, because you have no idea. You don't have all the information. And also just discussing like, what does ongoing connection mean to you? That can be different. Like maybe for a gestational carrier, that is like, I want the pictures, like I want the updates. That's it. That's all I want. For another gestational carrier, that can be, no, I want to know everything. You tell me when they start walking, like what's their favorite food? Like I want to see pictures of you guys and maybe we can visit. It has depth and layers. How to navigate this? Again, honest, clear conversations, even if they feel awkward. Like, hey, how would you feel if I had this idea to visit during Christmas with my family to see you and your future child? And like throw it out there and see what sticks, see what comes your way. it's also healthy to revisit expectations over time because again, you're learning each other in real time and things may change. So if you were discussing a dynamic at match, it's been 3 months, you're whatever, 8 weeks pregnant, 10 weeks pregnant, you're about to end first trimester. Let's do a check-in again. How is this feeling? How is this connection feeling? Do you feel like you're able to open up and get close to me? I think I'm struggling a little bit with that because we've communicated less in the last couple of weeks. Can we make a plan to communicate more? Like this is the level of assertiveness that is required for a healthy dynamic. And asking like, is anything feeling too much or not enough? Like this is a perfect temperature check at any point. Like, how's communication? How do you feel about my updates around medical appointments and vice versa? Like having the intended parent also share information about themselves. It's making it normal to check in is like the best tip. You can
I think
schedule.
it feels like a really delicate thing to balance. Especially coming off like that slide about trauma. So my intended parent and I just had a failed transfer. Earlier, a couple of, I don't know, month or so ago, we had like a small communication breakdown. We redid our communication expectations. She doesn't like to communicate by text and email. And so we started scheduling weekly phone calls, and that was better. And then we had this failed transfer, and we haven't talked on the phone again since. We just got a new med calendar, and she's like, okay, so since transfer is not for a while, why don't we pick up our weekly calls later? And that last slide about trauma, it was very like, yeah, she's pulling back from communication. She's not, you know, maybe she's going through something with this failed transfer. Totally understandable. But how do you then navigate and check in and say, that's not, that doesn't, that doesn't meet my expectations anymore. It's
Yeah,
really delicate and some hard to do.
yeah. And you're 100% right. This is like a nuanced dance that you'll never have a right answer or a right plan for. It's very human and it's very nervy because like your intended parent is coming off of a failed transfer, likely with the high hopes that, okay, this is going to work. I've invested so much in this. This is going to work. We did it. It didn't work. Uh-oh, I need to now rethink this whole thing. What if this actually all doesn't work? And there could be a fear there of, well, I don't want to get too close to my carrier because what if this doesn't work? Like, what if I'm investing energy and hope into a relationship that will hurt me? And not because my GC will hurt me. It's because this experience, the outcome won't be there that I desire in building my family. If it's a trauma response that you're being met with, that's always going to be hard as a recipient, like the recipient of the trauma response. You will always be in a challenging position because you're not necessarily like in this relationship with your IP right now. You're now in the relationship with her trauma or her fear or her grief. And so that dynamic is tricky. Sometimes time helps to move that aside. There can be moments of your journey where you are going to accommodate for some of the changes, like you will pause communication, but it doesn't mean you should silence your needs and your hopes for the relationship dynamic. So if you haven't yet already, being able to voice either directly to her or that the agency, like, hey, I don't want to feel like I'm left in the dark here. I understand this was something that hurt both of us, but I do want it to be known that like I'm still in this and I want to support and be there for her. And I need to feel that back. And maybe it's not like she needs to call and check on me, but I just need to know that like she's also thinking about me the way I'm thinking about her. So like voicing it is still very important. At the end of the day, you can't control another person's behaviors, but you have a lot of support that you can resource for yourself. If the failed transfer felt like a big dynamic or a big deal for you, please resource for yourself. Please check in with your agency or check in with mental health. But like, you're right, this is a really tricky dance because you are oftentimes losing the relationship with your IP as the carrier when there's loss or failure, and are now in the dynamic with their trauma or with their grief. And that's like way harder to figure out. But unfortunately, you have your own trauma and grief and pain and loss. And because of that, you still need to advocate for your needs. using your coordinator or your agency, I mean, they're there for that. They're the facilitators for some of that. And then this slide's kind of paying into this too, where it's like not only managing conflict and tension, but also just failure or challenges or any of those big speed bumps. It's all, unfortunately, part of the process. Pregnancy is so unpredictable. Surrogacy is never guaranteed. IVF takes care of things on a molecular level, but there's still so much unknown and unpredictability in this experience. So what matters is how you handle these sort of situations when it's conflict or when it's tension. Specifically with conflict, you know, you don't know each other. So you don't know what the other person looks like on their bad day or on their day that they're in a mood. And you don't know what's going to come at you. So this is really important to discuss ahead of time. How are you when you're managing stress or like when you're bothered? Are you someone who needs to get on the phone and talk about things right away? Are you someone who needs time to process and will say, hey, like, can we revisit this on Monday? Or in this dynamic, are you someone who's going to lean on your agency or your coordinator to be like your mediator, or your middleman, or just someone that can take some of the edge off? It's really helpful to have those things discussed and like share it at the beginning, so that when you get to these points, like for example, if you have this experience of a failed cycle, you know how to be there for each other. You've already said, hey, I'm going to need time. If I'm upset about something, I will distance myself. It'll look like I'm avoiding you. This is just part of my process. And sometimes this conflict resolution planning can give you just really good strategies to manage some of the bumps. This is not something that is too late to do at any point of the journey. Like literally you could be in third trimester and be like, hey, we have a lot of big things coming our way. Can we talk about how we're going to manage hard days? Or if I say something that bothers you, or if you read something that bothers you from my end, like how do we address those things? Check-ins, like I would encourage that again, as often as possible. Engage your coordinator in that if you can. And then just addressing the small stuff before it turns big is key. It's way easier to heal a scratch than a scar. And unfortunately, when you let a lot of scratches occur, where it's a communication scratch or dynamic scratch or whatever it is, the scars are going to be there throughout the experience and really taint it for both parties. And so being really proactive about addressing little blips and little challenges is really important and never too late to do. And then leading with kindness. So I don't want to paint this picture that like the IPGC relationship is just doomsday and it's really hard and challenging. It's not. It's like at the same time, it's one of the most beautiful dynamics. Like who in the world decides to be in a relationship like this as often as you see in surrogacy? Like people don't just want to like partner with someone and help them in a very personal, deep, life-changing way all the time. So these dynamics, this relationship and who you are as a carrier who wants to come into surrogacy, like you are above the status quo. Like you are unnatural in the best way. You are someone who has a heart and is willing to sacrifice a chunk of your life to provide a huge gift to another or another families. And so leading with kindness is really important on both ends, because kindness is what often brings everyone together anyway. It's saying thank you often. It's checking in without an agenda. It's just letting each other be human, like respecting that there's ugliness in this experience, unfortunately, and that's part of the human process, and that's okay. This relationship might be for a season, it might last a lifetime. Either way, it's just something you're choosing to do with someone else. It's quite extraordinary. And all you could do beyond, like, obviously the physicality of what you're doing in terms of carrying a pregnancy for someone else, is also just trusting yourself, continuously showing up, not only for the relationship, not only for the IPGC relationship, but also for you, like how important it is for you to still prioritize taking care of yourself, listening to your body, listening to what you need, lead with your heart. I mean, these are the things that make a surrogacy experience successful, even if it's not what you had visioned it would be. And then just knowing that like you're in a dynamic in a relationship where you're building trust every day so intensely. Like it's not like this in other relationships. So you want to make sure that your trust grows in a space where there's honesty, flexibility, and just kindness. If you're having a challenge with your intended parent, or if your intended parent is having a challenge with you, I mean, throw kindness glasses on first and try to understand where they are and what's happening for them. And even if you can't understand the exact details, you can understand the feelings. You can understand all of us have those same feelings. If we don't have the same life experiences, we all know what sadness feels like. We all know what grief and loss may feel like. We know what joy feels like. So you can connect to the emotional experience, if not anything else. And that's what I would encourage all of you to like keep your heart and minds open. But this does not exclude you. You're very important. You have to be totally on top of your emotional experience as well, and giving yourself that same kindness right back. And that's it. Any thoughts, questions, feedback? Anything stand out that resonated? Okay. Okay, move forward. I'm going to, yep, last slide. So this is recorded, and these, questioning all these. So I'm getting a question about the slides. Yes, I can make these available for reference. I can get these over to Surrogacy Is, and I imagine they'll figure out a way to distribute it. But yes, I can make these available as a resource. Other than that, if you are working or partnered with Surrogacy Is, so are we. And so Embra Health, our team is going to be your main providers and touch points for those mental health experiences and just mental health support. You have so many great resources provided to you through your agency. So please use them and expect to hear from us as well, because we'll be throwing some other opportunities each month to educate, to resource, and just to support you in this experience. You deserve it, and we want to give it to you. So thank you all for making the time tonight.